card from a set that is supposed to be a big deal, but it's really not taken off like people have expected. Low-numbered parallels are still selling quite well despite what some experts want to say about certain products. Rare autographs of kind of obscure talent, there's still a market for those, despite people not talking about them. And two of what could be considered the most important cards in the wrestling card hobby. All this and more in today's video. This is the Wrestling Card Market Watch for June 2022. What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. If this is your first time stopping by the channel, thank you for your time. And for all of those who have already subscribed and been day oneers, I thank you for the continued support. Each month I do one of these videos looking back at the last month's sales. And I'm not looking at it necessarily from a, you should buy this, you should sell this, you should invest in this. It's more so just to point out some interesting sales of certain cards, maybe some talking points that can kind of relate to what I've seen that have been discussed within the wrestling card community as of late, all while trying to help you, the collectors, navigate this wild world that we call the hobby. But before we look at some of these sales from June 2022, here's just a few reminders of how you, the viewers, can help show your support for this channel and any other content that I'm putting out. The easiest thing you can do, you're already here, hit that subscribe button, please. Give me a like if you're digging this video. If you've liked any of my other videos in the past in the archives, which you should definitely go check those out if you haven't already. And then share this with a friend. That's one of the best things you can do besides subscribing. Get the word out about this channel, this video, my podcast. We'll get into that in 1 second. But again, just sharing this with a wrestling fan, a family member, a friend, your grandma, anybody that can watch and maybe get something out of these videos. I said podcast. We got two to talk about. Wrestling with Cards, the podcast, my solo podcast. Every couple weeks I'll drop an episode, not as consistent as it used to be, but it's turned into somewhat of a more like philosophical chat of stuff that's just kind of on my mind, certain hobby topics. Again, not necessarily a buy this, sell this, but more like digging into the perspective of the way people think and just kind of my opinions on different things. All original content, we're not recycling any content on there anymore that we do on this channel. Also check out Worlds Collide Wrestling Card Podcast, myself and Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com. Each and every week we're getting together to talk all things wrestling cards. No topic is off limits with us. And again, both of those podcasts are available on all popular podcast platforms. So if you'd like to check them out, just search Worlds Collide Wrestling Card Podcast, Wrestling with Cards. You should be able to find them, and please subscribe as soon as you find them. We'd appreciate it. If you would like to help contribute to my content monetarily, there's a few ways you can do that. The best thing to do is check out Wrestling with Cards on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits like all of these fine folks here that have shown their support through Patreon. But there's also other tiers you can get. The more you pay, the more stuff you get, the more exclusive content. And you never know when I'm dropping eBay coupons for up to 40% off. That's what this month's was. Bonus videos. And there's an interesting video project that I've been talking about and working on. Again, it's a time-consuming thing just to even get out like a trailer or the first episode of a series or whatever. But I'm working on it, and a lot of that stuff will be exclusive on Patreon. You can check out my eBay store, Beast Mode Collectibles. We've got cards for as little as $1.50 shipped. There's combinations you can get to get free shipping up to 30% off orders of 10 items or more. We've got slabs, we've got sports cards, we've got memorabilia. You never know what's going to be over there. Check me out on all social platforms. Again, links below to not only everything I've spoke about, but also where you can find me on social media. And of course, links to buying me a coffee. Got to stay caffeinated to keep these videos rolling out. And once again, everything I've spoke about is in the links in the show notes. 2022 WWE Prism Odyssey Jones Prism Gold. $76 with $4.65 shipping. So here we have a Panini Prism Gold, first year WWE, which are numbered to 10, of a wrestler that, well, no disrespect, is not that popular in the wrestling card space. Yet it sold for what I would consider a good price, all things considered. But I've talked about this over and over again. This is just another example of how rarity and scarcity is always going to win out long term. Even for lesser named talents or not as popular talents like what we mentioned here, or even maybe a lesser known brand or lesser known sets. For all the hate that WWE Prism and a few other different brands and sets get within the hobby, there are still going to be people out there that just want these things. Set collectors, super collectors, or people that just know where to find value. 2012 Topps Heritage Paul Bearer Auto BGS authenticated with a 10 graded auto, $299.95. However, a best offer of $210 with $2.95 shipping. a few weeks ago on the Worlds Collide podcast. Again, I mentioned that previously. You can go check that out. Again, links in the show notes. But a few weeks back, we had a specific topic that we were talking about. What are some of the best autographs for wrestling cards? From pack pulled, to hand signed, to mainstream, to obscure. And while Paul Bearer was in the WWF, and for those old school historians, we know him as Percy Pringle, I would actually still consider him a little bit more in that obscure category when it comes to his collector base and autographs. But as I've said with this past gold that I just talked about with Odyssey Jones, there's still a market for these things. Not to mention this 2012 Heritage Auto set does have a pretty solid collector base. It's a very well-rounded collection of autos within this set. Not to mention cool throwback design. And this kind of goes with the point of the last card I talked about. I think the wrestling card hobby, like other aspects of the hobby sometimes, they get inundated with the mainstream hobby headline, the cards with all the zeros and commas. But we have to remember from both a buyer perspective, a seller perspective, just anybody that's kind of researching anything within wrestling cards, we have to remember there's always a market and a segment of collectors for certain cards, regardless of whether it's mainstream hobby headline cards or if it's just like some 80s Topps base cards. I'm not the biggest fan of just base cards unless it's like an autograph that goes into a collection or a super collection. But that's just me. That's what I collect. Different people collect different ways, as we've spoke about many times. 2002 Fleer Royal Rumble Randy Orton PSA 9, $275. However, a best offer of $220 with $4.50 shipping was accepted. Okay, now this is an interesting one. The set that a lot of people deem as one of the most important sets, and I've talked about this plenty of times. The 2002 Fleer Royal Rumble is mainly carried by the big four rookie cards in this set. Randy Orton, as we're talking about today, Brock Lesnar, John Cena, and Batista. So for this example we're talking about today, we've got a PSA 9, which in all honesty is very solid considering we know how condition sensitive the cards in this set are. And also as of late, it's been interesting to see that many people are really looking at Randy Orton and being like, this guy's a Hall of Famer. Look at his longevity. Look how great he looks on TV. He's got promo skills now. RKO is like as big as the Diamond Cutter at this point. So there's a lot of hype around Randy Orton. Yet this card is kind of dragging. Or is it? If we look at 3 sales here of this card over the course of the past 3 months, including the one we're talking about today, you will see a gradual increase. And I think this is great. This is what I like to see with wrestling cards, as I've stated in the past. I like that slow, steady growth. But there's a couple of things we need to keep in mind here when we're looking at this card, this set, and maybe how it can relate to some other things and pricing. Even in higher grades, sometimes these wrestling cards are just not going to fetch the prices that many people think they should, in comparison with similar grades and names within other aspects of the hobby: baseball, basketball, football. It just is what it is, unfortunately. And I think as we kind of go into the selling mode, or trading, even looking for value on some of these cards you may have in your collection, I think if we can keep our expectations kind of moderate to low, especially in our current economic state, maybe we could view these cards from a more long-term perspective and kind of see the value of what it could be in a few years as opposed to what the market says it is now. We all know markets can change. I'm just as guilty as anyone as sometimes looking at certain things through the short-term lens where I should be looking at it long-term. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. 1998 Comic Images The Rock Auto, $3,000 with $4.75 shipping. This is what I think, in my opinion, is the biggest, best autograph card in the wrestling card space. And that could be a whole topic on a whole other episode. We may do that sometime, maybe a collector spotlight. But the characteristics of this card, the features, and why I think it's so important, I've talked about it several times in the past videos and podcasts. Again, make sure to check out archives of this channel and all the podcasts that I'm on. But the prices of these things, they just keep climbing. I was talking about steady growth. This has definitely had a steady growth, but it just keeps going higher and higher and higher. But 2 things I want to touch on here. First, $3,000 for this card in raw format in the modern hobby era of slabs, where we can't buy anything if it's not in a PSA, SGC, BGS slab, because that just means it's not real. If it's not a PSA 10, it's not worth my time, right? Well, I think this is pretty impressive specifically for this card. It shows the confidence of this card specifically, as I've talked about being a massive, if not maybe the most important autograph card in wrestling card history, but also the faith of this specific card in raw format and that people are still willing to throw down that amount of money for something that's not in a slab. To my knowledge, we haven't seen a lot of fakes of this specific card around. Thankfully, fingers crossed it stays that way. I think it's also a little bit of the fact that The Rock isn't really signing much, if at all, anymore. The second thing I want to talk about real quick is the price on this card specifically, and maybe some pricing discrepancy when we're looking at the actual sale. This sale has been backed up on eBay sold and 130 point at being $3,000. But as noted on a recent episode of WTC TV, again, go check out WrestlingTradingCards.com YouTube page. Fantastic stuff over there, and please subscribe while you're there. Paul and Tony pointed out that this card hadn't shown up on Card Ladder yet. In fact, I think the same exact card was showing sold at like $1,500. So half the price, what's the discrepancy? Either way, this card has just shown huge growth, even in raw format slabs. We're talking a whole different ballgame. But it's just great to see that this card is just continually going forward. I hope there's going to be an opportunity at some point for many of you out there to grab this card. I've seen on social media content creators talking about how they really want this card, and guys, just remember, if you kind of put your head down, work hard, consolidate some of your collection that maybe isn't as important, you can get some dream cards like this. 1981 Poppy Hulk Hogan, $4,300. However, a best offer of $3,800 was accepted. I still think there's a lot of people out there that don't know about this card, or maybe they just don't care. And the not caring point, that's exactly what I want to talk about. This is a great card. It's a great photo of Hogan. He's standing there flexing and posing. It's one of those less is more. Again, that's why I like the 82-83 All-Stars. They're very boring, basic designs, but there's just something about vintage cards that I love that about. And this card is somewhat rare, and what I mean by that is if you go on eBay any given day and you try searching it, you may find one or two copies in varying degrees of condition or grade. This card also, clearly as of this sale, fetches pretty good prices, sometimes even more than some of the other Hogan cards out there. Which then begs the question, why is this card not talked about like the 82 All-Stars? Why is this card not talked about like 85 Tops or OPC or Scanlons? And why is this card not talked about with some of the other early 80s Hogan releases that could also be considered rookie cards? I think honestly it's just because the hobby has settled on the 82. Call it a rookie card, call it an XRC, I honestly could care less. The hobby has decided that 82 Wrestling All-Stars is the Hulk Hogan card to own. It's what has infiltrated the mainstream hobby both in wrestling and outside of wrestling, and it's just something that's stuck with collectors. But that being said, once again, that doesn't mean this card is worthless. In fact, I was just praising how awesome this card was. Also, there are some very experienced collectors, very smart people out there. You know who you are. You've seen them on social media. You know them. They're gobbling up these cards or getting them signed or, putting them away in their collections. Clearly, these collectors have shown a track record of making good decisions. So I like to learn from what other smart people are doing and sometimes apply that to what I'm doing. Just some food for thought. Plus, if you're a Hogan collector, you gotta have this, right? But I think the takeaway on this card specifically is that just because a card is rare, scarce, or goes for a lot of money doesn't mean it's the hobby's preferred card. And that's a little bit contradicting of what I started this show with when I was talking about the Odyssey Gold Prism I started the show off with. It's a little bit harder to find, not fetching the prices obviously as this, and he's not a Hulk Hogan, but there's just markets for all different kinds of cards out there. So whether you're looking to buy, sell, or trade, just make sure you do your research and don't take things at face value just because something isn't a rookie card or just because something isn't in vogue with the community. Thanks for watching the video today. I hope it brought you some value. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Give me a like before you get out of here. And also check below in the show notes for all the links of things I've talked about today. Patreon, podcasts, eBay store, social links, and much more. I appreciate all your support, and until next time, click the videos on the screen for more great wrestling card content, and I'll see you there.